I stood there in my black gown, blood trickling from the corner of my lip where my mother had just slapped me in front of 100 of New York's elite. The sting wasn't from the physical pain. It was from the realization that took 30 years to sink in I had never been part of this family. I was just the inconvenient eldest daughter, the shadow that made my golden sister Bella shine brighter. My husband Nathaniel stepped forward, his hand gentle as he wiped the blood away with his pocket square. His eyes, usually warm, had turned to ice as he looked at my parents. The entire ballroom had fallen silent after I projected those videos on the massive screen. Videos of Bella throwing away my wedding invitation. Videos of her using our mother's iPad to delete every email I sent. Videos of her spitting on the FedEx envelope that contained the only bridge I had tried to build back to this family. But before I tell you how I brought down the Montgomery Empire in one night, before I show you how I turned my sister's engagement party into her public execution, let me take you back. Because revenge, real revenge, isn't born from a single moment of anger. It's cultivated through years of small deaths, tiny humiliations, and the slow suffocation of hope. If you're enjoying this story of justice and transformation, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more stories of people who refuse to be victims, and drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in my situation. Your support means everything. Now let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up believing that if I was good enough, quiet enough, accomplished enough, my parents would finally see me. My sister Bella arrived when I was 7, and from the moment she took her first breath, I became invisible. It wasn't dramatic. There were no Cinderella moments of obvious cruelty. It was subtler, more insidious. My mother would introduce Bella as her daughter and me as well, also her daughter, with that slight pause that said everything. My father would attend every one of Bella's dance recitals, but somehow always had business meetings during my architecture presentations. I told myself it didn't matter. I threw myself into my studies, graduated top of my class from Cornell, and worked 80-hour weeks at one of Manhattan's most prestigious architecture firms. I paid for my own apartment, my own car, my own life. I didn't need them, I convinced myself. But the human heart is a treacherous thing. It keeps hoping, even when the brain knows better. When I met Nathaniel Vance at a tech conference 3 years ago, I thought he was just another IT professional trying to make it in New York. He was charming, smart, and kind in ways I had never experienced. He actually listened when I spoke. He remembered the small things I mentioned in passing. He made me feel like I mattered. We got married in a small ceremony 8 months ago, just the two of us and a handful of friends at City Hall. I didn't invite my family because, well, why set myself up for another disappointment? But Nathaniel, bless his naive heart, thought family could be fixed. He convinced me to reach out to try one more time. So I spent weeks designing custom wedding invitations, handwritten notes to each family member, explaining that we wanted to celebrate with them, that I missed them, that maybe we could start fresh. I sent them by FedEx with tracking, with hope. Weeks passed, no response, no calls. No texts, nothing. I checked the tracking numbers obsessively. Delivered, signed for by Bella Montgomery. I told myself there must be an explanation. Maybe they were planning a surprise. Maybe they were busy. Maybe. The maybes are what kill you slowly. Then came the Instagram post. Bella had gotten engaged to Preston Whitmore, a prominent attorney from one of those families whose names are on building wings and scholarship funds. The engagement party was scheduled for Christmas Eve at the Montgomery estate. I saw the photos, ice sculptures, crystal chandeliers, a guest list that read like a Forbes compilation. My mother's caption celebrating our baby girl's happiness with our closest family and friends. I wasn't mentioned, I wasn't invited, I didn't exist. That should have been my Jiotnuk Chanli, my final straw. But I'm embarrassed to admit I still tried. I called, I left voicemails, I sent texts. Each one more desperate than the last. Please, I just want to be part of the family. Please, I just want to celebrate with you. Please. The word please should be banned from the English language. It gives false hope to the hopeless. Nathaniel watched me unravel. He held me through the crying sessions, the self-doubt, the moments where I wondered if I was the problem. Was I too sensitive? Too demanding? Was it wrong to want your family to acknowledge your existence? He never told me what to do, but I could see something shifting in his eyes. Something cold and calculating that I had never seen before. 3 weeks before Bella's engagement party, Nathaniel came home early from work. He poured 2 glasses of wine, sat me down and said 4 words that changed everything I know the truth. He had done what I was too scared to do. He had investigated. Nathaniel had hired a private investigator to install discreet cameras around the Montgomery estate, completely legal under New York surveillance laws, since they were pointed at publicly accessible areas like the front porch and driveway. What he found was worse than I had imagined. The investigator captured Bella receiving my FedEx package, opening it, reading my heartfelt letter, and then with a smile on her face throwing it in the recycling bin. But she didn't stop there. She spat on it. She actually spat on my wedding invitation before tossing the whole thing away like garbage. But the real revelation came from the digital forensics. Nathaniel's team had legally obtained metadata showing that every email I sent to my family had been intercepted and deleted by Bella using my mother's iPad. She had even gone so far as to block Nathaniel's number from my parents' phones. She had systematically erased me from their lives, and they had let her. They had never even seen my attempts to reconnect. When Nathaniel showed me the evidence, something inside me didn't break. It crystallized. All the years of doubt, of wondering what was wrong with me, of trying to be good enough, they evaporated. I wasn't the problem. I had never been the problem. I was just the convenient scapegoat, the designated failure that made everyone else feel successful. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair and asked me a question I'll never forget. What do you want to do about it? What did I want? For the first time in my life, I let myself feel the rage. The pure, undiluted fury that I had been taught was unladylike, inappropriate, too much. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to know exactly who they had discarded. I wanted them to understand the magnitude of their cruelty. But most of all, I wanted them to lose something precious, the way I had lost the fantasy of having a loving family. Nathaniel smiled, and it wasn't the warm smile I had fallen in love with. It was the smile of a predator who had just been given permission to hunt. That's when he told me the truth about who he really was. Nathaniel Vance wasn't just some IT guy making a decent salary. He was the Nathaniel Vance founder and CEO of Vance Cybersecurity, one of the most powerful tech companies in the nation. The man my father had been trying to meet for years, whose investment could make or break companies, who held more power in his little finger than my entire family combined. And he was my husband. I had married him when he was wearing jeans and a hoodie at a coffee shop near the conference centre, arguing with a barista about the proper way to make a pour-over. I had fallen in love with him in our cramped studio apartment when we were both supposedly struggling young professionals. He had never told me because he wanted someone to love him for who he was, not what he owned. And I had given him that gift without even knowing it. Now he wanted to give me a gift in return, justice. We spent 2 weeks planning. Nathaniel had connections everywhere. He knew exactly who would be at Bella's engagement party because he was the invisible hand behind so many of their businesses. Harrison Sterling Preston's father, and my father's most crucial business partner, was actually in negotiations with one of Nathaniel's subsidiary companies. My father's precious merger, the one he had been working on for 3 years, the one that would finally make Montgomery Properties a major player, it all hinged on Sterling's approval. And Sterling's financial backing came from a venture capital firm that Nathaniel controlled 51% of. My father had been bowing and scraping to impress a man whose fate was actually in his son-in-law's hands. The irony was delicious. We decided on Christmas Eve at the engagement party I was never invited to. Nathaniel made one phone call to Harrison Sterling, mentioning casually that his wife Caroline Montgomery had been deliberately excluded from her own sister's celebration and that he found it personally offensive. Harrison being the social climber, he was immediately ensured we received a last-minute invitation framed as an unfortunate clerical error. My mother's phone call was panicked. "Caroline, darling, there's been a terrible mistake with the invitations. Of course you're invited. We want you there. Please come. Bring your husband." The sweetness in her voice was so thick it could have caused diabetes. I told her we would be delighted to attend. I bought a black dress for the occasion. In high society, wearing black to an engagement party is considered inappropriate, almost hostile. It's a colour for funerals, not celebrations. But that was exactly the point. I was attending the funeral of my old self, the Caroline who begged for scraps of affection. I was attending as the woman I had become, the black swan, returning to a lake full of white ducks. Nathaniel wore a custom Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than Bella's engagement ring. When we arrived at the Montgomery estate, fashionably late, I could feel the shift in energy. People turned to stare. Whispers rippled through the crowd. My mother's face went pale when she saw us, then flushed red when she processed the black dress. My father was in the middle of laughing at one of Harrison Sterling's jokes when his eyes landed on Nathaniel, and I watched the exact moment recognition dawned. But Bella, oh Bella, she couldn't help herself. She had to be the centre of attention, even when it meant destroying someone else. The crystal chandelier above us cast fractured light across the ballroom as Bella seized the microphone from the band leader's hand. Her diamond bracelet caught the light, throwing tiny rainbows across the ceiling that seemed to mock what was about to happen. The live string quartet fell silent mid-note, their bows suspended in air. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bella's voice rang out, saccharine sweet with an edge sharp enough to draw blood. "I want to take a moment to acknowledge someone very special who just arrived. My older sister, Caroline." She paused, letting the words hang in the air like a noose. 30 years old and still searching for her Prince Charming. "Actually, wait," I stand corrected. "She did get married recently. To an IT guy she met at some tech conference. Isn't that just precious?" The laughter started as a ripple, uncertain and uncomfortable, like people weren't sure if they were allowed to find cruelty entertaining. My mother's laugh, though, that rang out clear and confident, encouraging others to join in. She was standing near the ice sculpture of 2 swans, her emerald necklace glinting as her shoulders shook with amusement. My father didn't laugh, but the way he looked away, suddenly fascinated by his whiskey glass, was somehow worse. Preston Whitmore, Bella's fiancé, in his impeccable Armani tuxedo, shifted his weight and studied the marble floor like it contained the secrets of the universe. "But I'm not a cruel person," Bella continued, her voice dripping with false magnanimity. She produced a silver-wrapped box from behind the podium, clearly planted there earlier. This whole performance had been choreographed. I got my dear sister an engagement present. I know she couldn't afford to get us anything, what with her husband's modest salary and all. But that's okay, I'm the generous sister. She walked toward me in her custom Vera Wang gown, each step deliberate heels clicking against marble like a countdown. The box landed in my hands, heavier than it should have been, with the weight of her malice. "Open it," she commanded sweetly, turning to make sure every phone camera in the room had a clear shot. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a membership card to Silver Connections, a dating service for people over 50, and a book with a cheerful yellow cover titled "Dying Alone Doesn't Have to Be Scary, A Guide to Self-Sufficiency in Your Golden Years." The crowd's laughter grew louder, more confident now that they understood the game. This was entertainment. This was what they came for, not just champagne and canapés, but Bloodsport dressed in evening wear. My mother glided over her Chanel perfume, arriving seconds before she did. "Oh, Caroline, take it, darling. Don't let that stubborn pride of yours turn you into one of those bitter old maids who collects cats and conspiracy theories. We're just looking out for you, sweetheart. At your age, you can't afford to be picky." Something inside me flickered. That old, familiar feeling, the one that made me 7 years old again, watching Bella deliberately break my favourite snow globe while my parents clapped at her spirit and handed me a broom to clean up the pieces. The wound was ancient, calcified a weight I had carried for so long, I forgot it wasn't part of my skeleton. But then I felt Nathaniel's hand barely a touch against my lower back. A reminder. I remembered the video of Bella spitting on my wedding invitation. I remembered the screen recordings of her deleting every desperate email I had sent, every plea to be included, every attempt to build a bridge she burned before I could cross it. I remembered her voice on that front porch video, so casual in her cruelty, as if I was nothing more than an inconvenient mosquito to be swatted away. And just like that, the wound stopped hurting. I smiled. Not a small smile, not a polite smile, but a genuine smile that came from somewhere deep and dark and finally free. "Thank you, Bella," I said, my voice cutting through the lingering laughter like a knife through silk. I took 2 steps forward, my black gown moving like smoke around me, and gently removed the microphone from her hand. She was so surprised she let it go without a fight. "That's incredibly thoughtful of you. And you know what, I brought you an engagement present too. I haven't had a chance to give it to you yet. But it's special, it requires a much bigger screen." I watched the flicker of confusion cross Bella's face, followed quickly by a flash of fear that she tried to mask with her pageant smile. Nathaniel was already moving his phone, connecting seamlessly to the mansion's projection system. My father had spent $40,000 on that system last year, bragging to his golf buddies about how he could display presentations on a screen the size of a small movie theatre. Perfect for business, perfect for destruction. The lights dimmed automatically as the first image appeared on the massive screen. For a moment there was just the date stamp December 15th, 3 months ago, and a clear view of the Montgomery Mansion's front entrance with its imported Italian stone columns, and the bronze door knocker, shaped like a lion's head, that my father loved showing off. Then the FedEx truck appeared in the frame. The ballroom, which had been buzzing with whispers and the clink of champagne flutes, went absolutely silent. Even the waiters stopped moving. Everyone watched as the driver walked up to the door, rang the bell, and waited. When Bella opened the door, she was wearing one of her casual designer outfits, the kind that cost $3,000 but was meant to look effortless. She signed for the package, thanked the driver with her picture-perfect smile, and waited until he drove away. Only then did she rip open the FedEx envelope. The audio on the video was crystal clear. You could hear the rustle of paper as she pulled out my handwritten letter, read the first few lines, then laughed. A cold, dismissive laugh that sounded nothing like the sweet voice she used in public. "As if I want this desperate loser at my engagement party. God, she's so pathetic. Still trying to crawl back into our lives like we didn't make it clear she's not wanted." She pulled out the wedding invitation I had spent weeks designing, hand-painted with watercolour flowers, calligraphy done by a professional, because I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted them to see that I had made something of myself that I was worth celebrating. Bella looked at it for exactly 3 seconds before walking over to the recycling bin. But before she threw it away, she did something that made several people in the ballroom gasp. She spat on it. A deliberate, contemptuous glob of saliva that landed right on the watercolour roses. Then she tossed the entire thing in the trash like it was junk mail and walked back inside, humming to herself. You could have heard a pin drop in that ballroom. Actually, you could have heard a dust particle land on velvet. But wait, I said, my voice echoing in the silence, there's more. The screen changed to show screen recordings, the kind with timestamps and metadata visible at the bottom. My mother's iPad. I recognised the case, Hermès leather, in that particular shade of cognac she loved. Email after email from me appeared on screen. Each one was opened, read for a few seconds, and then deleted. Not just deleted, but removed from trash too. Completely erased. The emails were heartbreaking to read again. Subject lines like, "Please call me back and I miss you," and "Can we talk?" Messages that started with, "I know you're probably busy, but I just wanted to reach out." The last one, sent 2 weeks before Bella's engagement announcement, said simply, "I don't understand what I did wrong. Please just tell me. I can fix it. I'll do anything." Every single one deleted by Bella's perfectly manicured fingers. You could see her reflection in the iPad screen, sometimes smiling as she erased me from our parents' lives. The final clip showed text messages from Nathaniel to my parents' phones. Each message marked as read, then blocked. Our parents never saw them. Never knew I had called, texted, emailed, begged. Bella had built a wall between us so seamlessly that they probably thought I had simply given up on them. When the screen went dark, the silence was suffocating. Bella's transformation was instantaneous. The sweet, gracious hostess evaporated, replaced by something feral and desperate. She lunged at me, trying to grab my phone, her French manicured nails aimed at my face. "Those are fake," she shrieked, her voice cracking into a register she usually reserved for private tantrums. She used AI to fabricate this. It's deepfake technology. You're all watching a jealous, disturbed woman trying to destroy me because she can't stand to see me happy. Preston, tell them. Tell them this is illegal, this is defamation, this is... The slap came so fast I barely saw my mother's hand move. The sound cracked through the ballroom like a gunshot. My head snapped to the side. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth as my lips split against my teeth. My cheek exploded in heat that radiated down my neck. For a moment everything went white at the edges of my vision. "You ungrateful snake," my mother hissed, her face contorted into something ugly that I had never been important enough to inspire before. "How dare you? How dare you come into this house and try to ruin your sister's one perfect night? You've always been jealous of her. Always. From the moment she was born, you couldn't stand that she was special and you were ordinary." The room spun slightly, but my mind was perfectly clear. I touched my lip, felt the warm blood, looked at the crimson on my fingertips. Then I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and saw a stranger wearing a familiar face. "That slap," I said quietly, calmly, letting the blood drip onto my black dress where it wouldn't show, "just cost you $5 million in assault and battery damages." I counted at least 50 witnesses, including 3 attorneys and 2 state senators. Would anyone like to dispute that they saw Trinity Montgomery strike me across the face? Not a single person spoke. Several people held up their phones, still recording. My father's face had gone from its usual ruddy colour to a dangerous shade of purple. He pointed at the door with a shaking hand. "Get her out!" he barked at the security guards stationed near the exits. "Get this psychotic bitch out of my house. You are not my daughter. Do you hear me? You are nothing to me. Nothing. You never were." 3 security guards started moving toward me, large men in ill-fitting suits who were probably contractors hired just for the night. I didn't move. Neither did Nathaniel. He simply raised one hand, a small gesture that shouldn't have meant anything. But it did. The guards stopped mid-step. Because the double doors at the entrance, those massive mahogany doors imported from Spain that my father loved to brag about, they didn't open to let me out. They opened to let someone else in. 6 men in black suits entered in perfect formation. Their suits actually fit. Their movements were synchronized like a military unit. Each one wore a small pin on their lapel, a logo most people wouldn't recognize, but some in the room definitely would. Vance Cybersecurity. The company that controlled digital infrastructure for half the Fortune 500. The company that made the news for acquiring 3 major cybersecurity firms in the last 2 years. The company whose CEO was notoriously private, rarely seen in public, worth an estimated $8 billion. And Nathaniel, my quiet husband, who supposedly fixed computers for a living, stepped forward. The change in him was terrifying and beautiful. His posture shifted, his expression hardened. Suddenly he looked like what he was, a man who controlled empires with a phone call, who held the financial futures of countless companies in his hands, who was so far above the people in this room that their opinions of him were irrelevant. Harrison Sterling Preston's father, and my father's ticket to the big leagues, had been standing near the bar with a whiskey in hand. The glass slipped through his fingers and exploded on the marble floor, amber liquid splashing across his Italian leather shoes. His face went pale, then red, then pale again. "Nathaniel Vance." His voice came out strangled. You're Nathaniel Vance." "The Nathaniel Vance? But I was told Caroline married some IT support technician. I was told..." Nathaniel's smile was colder than anything I had ever seen. "I am in IT support, Mr. Sterling. I support the technology infrastructure that runs your entire company. And your partners' companies. And about 70% of the companies represented in this room tonight." He paused, letting that sink in. "Including the venture capital firm funding your investment in Montgomery Properties." My father, who had been purple with rage seconds ago, went white as bone china. "You see," Richard Nathaniel continued, turning to face my father with the expression of a scientist examining an interesting but ultimately disposable specimen, "that merger you've been working on for 3 years. The one that's supposed to transform Montgomery Properties from a mid-tier development company into a major player, the one you've mortgaged everything for, including this house, It required Sterling Group's investment, which required funding from Apex Venture Partners, which I own 51% of. The word own echoed through the silent ballroom. And approximately 7 minutes ago, I pulled our funding. Permanently. The merger is dead. Montgomery Properties is dead. And by Monday morning when the news breaks, your reputation will be dead too. My father actually staggered. Nathaniel's security team shifted slightly, ready to catch him if he fell, but not out of kindness, out of professional obligation to prevent a lawsuit. "You can't do this," my father wheezed. "We had agreements, we had contracts. We've invested everything." Nathaniel cut him off with a look. "You can't do this," he repeated mockingly. Interesting choice of words. Richard, you couldn't be bothered to answer your daughter's phone calls. You couldn't be bothered to read her emails. You couldn't be bothered to show up to her wedding. But now, I can't pull funding from a merger. Your priorities are showing. But the real devastation, the moment that will live in my memory forever, came next. Preston Whitmore had been standing frozen, his handsome face cycling through expressions like a malfunctioning animation: shock, horror, disgust, calculation. As a lawyer, particularly a prosecutor who had built his career on high-profile fraud cases, he was watching his future disintegrate in real time. He walked toward Bella, with measured steps, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. She reached for him, her hand outstretched, her voice breaking into sobs. "Preston, baby, please. You know me. You know I would never—" He grabbed her hand, but not to comfort her. He twisted the 3-carat engagement ring off her finger, the one he had proposed with on a yacht in the Mediterranean, the one she had posted 17 Instagram stories about. Then he dropped it into the nearest champagne glass. The crystal pinged, the ring sank through the bubbles, and Preston picked up the glass and poured the entire thing onto Bella's white Vera Wang gown. The champagne spread across the silk like blood pink from the red wine someone had spilled on the table, the ring clinking against her designer shoes as it fell to the floor. "I'm an attorney," Preston said quietly, his voice deadly calm. "I've spent 7 years prosecuting criminals, fraud, embezzlement, corruption, and what you just admitted to on that video is federal mail tampering. That's Title 18 U.S. Code Section 1702. It's a felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison." He took a step back, his hands clasped behind his back like he was delivering a closing argument. "But that's not why I'm walking away. I'm walking away because I just watched you torture your sister for sport. I watched you systematically isolate her from your family through lies and deception. I watched you spit on her wedding invitation like she was garbage." His voice rose, addressing the entire ballroom now. Every phone was recording. Every eye was watching. This woman, Bella Montgomery, used fraud and manipulation to destroy her sister's relationship with their family. She committed federal crimes to satisfy petty jealousy. And I will not, under any circumstances, attach my name, my reputation, or my future to someone capable of such calculated cruelty. Bella's sobs turned into wails. She grabbed for Preston's jacket, but he stepped back smoothly, avoiding her touch like she carried a disease. Her perfect makeup was running now, black mascara cutting tracks through her foundation, her lips trembling, her hands shaking. The golden girl, the princess, the favourite daughter reduced to a desperate mess on the floor of her own engagement party. But I wasn't done, neither was Nathaniel. Nathaniel wasn't done. His assistant began distributing folders to every guest in the room. Inside were detailed financial records showing that Bella had embezzled over $200,000 from my mother's charity foundation to buy designer handbags and pay for Instagram promotion. There were also documents showing my father's tax evasion through shell companies. The sound of police sirens cut through Bella's wailing. Nathaniel had called them before we even arrived at the party. 2 officers entered, showed their badges, and read Bella her rights. She was being charged with federal mail tampering and embezzlement. My father was being served with a warrant for his financial records. My mother, for the first time in my life, looked at me with something other than dismissal. She looked terrified. "Caroline, please," she begged, grabbing my arm. "Tell your husband to stop this. We're family. You can't do this to family." I looked down at her hand on my arm, the same hand that had slapped me minutes ago, and carefully removed it. Family, I said softly, doesn't systematically erase one of their children. Family doesn't spit on wedding invitations. Family doesn't laugh while someone is publicly humiliated. You stopped being my family the day you decided Bella was enough and I was too much. This family died 8 months ago when I sent those invitations. You're just finding out about the funeral now. Nathaniel wrapped his arm around my waist and we turned to leave. I picked up the gift box that Bella had given me, the senior dating app membership and the book about dying alone, and tossed it at her feet as the officers put handcuffs on her wrists. Keep it, I said. You're going to need it when you get out of prison. Because by then you'll be older, poorer and truly alone. The difference is I chose my solitude and built a life I love. You're about to have loneliness forced upon you as a consequence of your cruelty. There's a distinction. We walked out of the Montgomery mansion for the last time. Behind us, I could hear my mother crying, my father shouting into his phone at lawyers who couldn't fix this, and Bella screaming that this wasn't fair. The irony of that last one almost made me laugh. The next year was a whirlwind. The Montgomery family imploded in spectacular fashion. Bella's trial was all over the news. She was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison and ordered to repay the charity funds with interest. Preston's law firm made sure the case was airtight. My father's company went bankrupt when the merger fell through and his tax issues came to light. They had to sell the mansion to pay legal fees and back taxes. My mother tried to reach out several times, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologetic to accusatory to desperately sad. I listened to each one once felt the appropriate amount of emotion and then deleted them. I wasn't cruel enough to block her entirely, but I was wise enough not to engage. Some bridges once burned fertilized the ground for new growth instead of being rebuilt. As for me, I finally launched my own architecture firm, Montgomery Vance Designs. The Montgomery name stayed because I earned it. I built it with my own achievements, my own sleepless nights, my own sacrifices. I wasn't going to let them take that from me too. Nathaniel was my silent partner, providing the funding and connections, but making sure everyone knew this was my vision, my company, my success. 1 year to the day after the engagement party, we had our ribbon-cutting ceremony. The building was beautiful, all glass and clean lines representing transparency and new beginnings. Nathaniel stood beside me, holding our 3-month-old daughter Emma. She had my eyes and his smile and absolutely no connection to the Montgomery family drama. We made sure of that. As I cut the ribbon, cameras flashing, reporters asking questions about my innovative designs, a news alert popped up on my phone. Montgomery Mansion foreclosed by bank. Former socialite Bella Montgomery released from prison next month. I showed it to Nathaniel. He smiled and kissed my temple. Some endings are really beginnings, he said. That night, after the celebration, after putting Emma to bed, after making love to my husband in our home, filled with things we actually earned, I sat by the window looking out at the Manhattan skyline. My phone rang. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. In the morning, I listened to it. Caroline, your father had a stroke. He's in the hospital. I know you hate us, but please, he's asking for you. I'm alone here. Bella is gone. Everything is gone. Please. I saved the voicemail. I would decide later whether to respond, but the urgency, the assumption that I would drop everything to rescue them, that was gone. I had learnt the most important lesson: you cannot set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Eventually you burn up and they just complain about the dark. Here's what I want you to understand. This story isn't really about revenge, though revenge was satisfying. It's about the moment you realise that the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally have actually placed impossible conditions on that love. It's about recognising that you've been auditioning for a role in your own family, and no matter how perfect your performance, they've already cast someone else as the favourite. The hardest truth I learned is that some people are only in your life to teach you what you won't tolerate. My family taught me that I won't tolerate being invisible. I won't tolerate being the punchline to someone else's joke. I won't tolerate giving pieces of myself away to people who treat those pieces like garbage. But here's the beautiful part: once you stop auditioning, once you stop performing, once you stop trying to earn love from people who aren't capable of giving it, you create space for real love. The kind that doesn't require you to be smaller, quieter, less accomplished, less visible. Nathaniel loved me when I was nobody to him. My friends, the ones I built relationships with based on mutual respect, they loved me when I had nothing to offer but myself. My daughter will grow up knowing her mother stood up for herself, set boundaries, and refused to accept crumbs when she deserved the whole cake. Do I feel guilty about what happened to my family? Sometimes. Usually at 3 a.m. when Emma wakes up crying and I'm rocking her back to sleep thinking about my own mother rocking me once upon a time. But then I remember the slap, I remember the laughter, I remember the years of systematic erasure. And I remember that guilt is a tool abusive people use to keep you under control. I sleep fine at night now. So here's my question for you. How long are you going to let people treat you like you're not enough? How many times will you let them spit on your olive branches before you stop offering them? When will you realise that the problem isn't that you're too sensitive, too demanding too much, but that they're too comfortable treating you like you're too little? Your life is waiting on the other side of that boundary. Your peace is waiting in the moment you stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided you're guilty. Your happiness is waiting in the space you create when you remove people who drain you. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying you won't cry, doubt yourself, feel guilty, or wonder if you made the right choice. But I am saying it's worth it. Every single terrifying, painful, lonely moment of standing up for yourself is worth it. The black swan returned, not to beg for a place in the lake, but to remind everyone that swans can be black, beautiful, and powerful, and sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's living so well, so fully, so authentically, that their opinion of you becomes irrelevant. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever had to choose yourself over people who should have chosen you first, please hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about people who refused to stay victims. And most importantly, comment below. Tell me your story. Tell me when you realised you deserve better. Tell me about your black swan moment. Your voice matters. Your story matters. You matter. Remember, you're not too much. You were just surrounded by people who couldn't handle all of you, and that's their loss, not yours.